When we start to think about training for specific sports, what we have to do is think about the principles that could apply to all sports. And first, let's just define what we think of as training for a sport. So what we're going to do is we are going to train for the test. So whether it be a performance, a competition, it doesn't matter. We're going to try to identify what is going to be tested. And then based off of that, we're going to evaluate how we should build our training. Okay, so the first thing that I do when I go to any sport, whether it's an athlete or I'm doing the sport myself, I'm going to try to identify what is going to create the biggest change with the fewest inputs. Okay, so I like to go off the 80-20 rule. What are 20% of the inputs that create 80% of the change, right? So if we only do these 20% of the things and it gets us most of the way there, what are those things? And usually I like to think about it as finding three basics. So if I ask the question, what are the three basics that produce the most results? If I just focus on those things, then I'm going to be able to get as much change as possible. Usually people go the opposite way and they try to find the tips, the tricks to get 5% change at a time, but that's a waste of your time, especially if you're switching over to a new sport. If you're a veteran in a sport and you're looking for that last 1% change, that's when you start to focus on those smaller, minute details. Let's use this framework to look at a couple of example sports and think about what the test is and what our three big inputs are that we can use for 80% of getting better in the sport. So first, let's talk about Olympic weightlifting. This is one that I'm most qualified to talk about, but the test, it really comes down to 3 attempts at a maximal lift in the snatch and the clean and jerk. Okay. And then really you can boil it down to how much weight you can stand up in both the snatch and the clean and jerk. That's what the test is. So what we want to do is we want to focus on what are the main things that are going to be able to get us to stand up the most amount of weight when we go to pick it up off the ground. Okay. So the first one in that 80-20 rule is positions. If I can't hit the positions, it doesn't matter how strong I am. I can pull 1,000 pounds. If I can't get down to the bottom to catch it, then I am not going to win at my test, right? Second one is going to be how much weight you can catch. Okay, so if I can get in really good positions, I'm very mobile, but I can't hold 20 pounds over my head, that's an issue. That's going to limit me. So if I erase that limitation and I start working on that, then I'm going to be able to do more weight. And then the last one in this order is pull strength. So if I can hit the positions and I can stand up a lot of weight, then my limiting factor is how much weight I can get off the ground. So we would start to evaluate and put together a program on trying to just focus in on those three things and not get too overly complicated. Okay, if we started with just a week of programming, then we could split these things up into 5 days a week, and then we could focus in on what is going to improve those. Start very simple, start very light, and then progressively work more complex and with more volume and more load over time, incorporating in some deload phases so that we fully recover. But if we just did that for years, if we did that for 10 years, then if you really just focus on those three things, then you could be world class, theoretically, right? Let's talk about jiu-jitsu. This is another one that I come across a lot. So the test will just go off of a regular ADCC no-gi match, just an example. So it's a 10-minute match, and you can win either by submission, you can win by scoring points, or you can win with the ref stops the match, right? So that is what we're going to be testing on. Now, this is a lot more broad than the specific test of the Olympic weightlifting. So the first thing in our 80-20 rule is learning all the techniques. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different techniques that could be in one single match going on in jiu-jitsu. You should know all of those. If you don't, then your opponent would have a significant advantage over you. Okay, then it's your 10-minute work capacity. So we know the time domain that we're going to be working in, work towards that time domain. If I can produce 10 times more work than somebody else in 10 minutes, then I am going to be able to go very hard for the full duration of the match. And if you start failing on your cardiovascular capacity, it doesn't matter how strong you are, being winded will make you weak very fast. And then finally, if you know all the techniques and you have an amazing 10-minute work capacity, if you're strong and you can overpower your opponent, that goes a long way, okay? It doesn't beat technique and it doesn't work if you're tired, but if you're strong and you can overpower your opponent, then you have a higher percentage chance of winning. And if we focus on just those three things for the next decade, then you would be very, very proficient at jiu-jitsu. This could be applied to any sport out there. We just need to identify what the test is, and then we need to figure out what the factors are that are going to produce 80% of the results.